Howdy folks, and welcome to another episode of Learning to Turn with me, Gouge. Well, we've reached the final turn in this circuit. We have, sitting on the table saw behind me and a couple in front of me, 18 blanks that are ready to be hollowed out. So the outside has been shaped, we have a tenon to put them on the chuck, and now we need to get the wood out of the middle. It's not a bowl until there's an inside, right? That's going to take two operations, and I'm going to break this into two separate episodes. One for the first operation, which is to use the trusty 40/40 bowl gouge to remove about the first 2/3 of the wood. It'll get to a point where the 40/40 can neither make the turn to finish the cut, but also, more importantly, will be running into end grain and it'll stall. You'll see, I'll get to that point and it'll start creating powder instead of good curls of wood coming off the gouge. At that point, we switch to another tool, the bottom bowl gouge. Again, that'll be a separate episode, so while I'll be filming it all in one go, I'll be slicing and dicing it in the editor and showing that to you later. But for now, let's cover the particulars of what goes into the initial cut with the bowl gouge. This is a curved cut, meaning the handle will be going through a swing. That means, of course, right foot forward. Left hand will be underhand, thumb on top, fingers on top, pulling down, but not putting any pressure onto the bevel as always. Tool rest is just as you see it here, parallel to the end of the bowl. The vertical angle will be a little bit flatter than usual. Normally we're down around 10 degrees. This one's somewhere in the 5 to 10 degree range. And the angle will start off a bit beyond 90 degrees, say about 95 for the first few cuts. And then as we get towards the end, that will actually get more pronounced with the tool starting off way forward like this, and then a big sweep or swing of the handle as I'm matching the shape of the bowl. The flute will start almost completely closed, what I call 3 o'clock, and will open slightly once the tool is set and is cutting and no longer has a risk of skidding. Skidding, that's one of the main things I need to be concerned about controlling here. As I approach the wood, first make contact, it's going to want to go this way. I don't know, I don't think my camera's in a good angle to show this, but just you can see this for yourself, and when I get it set at a different angle, I'll show it to you there. But if I just put that tool against there and turn it here, the tool is going straight for the outside. So to keep that from happening, I need to get a thumb down on the tool rest behind it so that it has nowhere to go. Also, we'll have the fingers wrapped around the top of the tool, holding it firmly. So hopefully I can avoid the skid at entry. Initial cuts will be more or less straight. I'll be carving a kind of a V shape or cone shape into the wood, and then as I work my way towards the edge, there will be more and more of a swing in the handle to start matching the shape of the bowl. Let's see, looking down my notes there, I think that about covers it. One of the quicker intros. Let's see if it's just as easy to do as it is to talk about. All right, talk to you on the other side. So this is going to be interesting because I'm not sure what I'm going to say for the next 43 minutes that we have together here. See, with the other episodes, I generally recorded the voiceover, shortly after I did the editing, and I had the whole episode kind of mapped out in my head, knew roughly what I wanted to say, at least what topics I wanted to cover. This time, however, I edited the next episode before recording this voiceover. So it's been, I don't know, a week or 10 days since I really looked at this. And it kind of reminds me of in graduate school, one of my best buddies pointed out that sometimes at the beginning of class, the professor we took most of our courses from would just say, "So, what do you think of the book this week?" And he knew that when the professor said that he hadn't prepared. Well, it's not going to work very well for me to ask you guys what you think, because you're not here on the voiceover. So I'm on my own, and let's see if I can figure out something useful to contribute as we go along here. One thing I notice already is that I'm not opening the flute once I have the bevel set. So I'm keeping it nearly fully closed, not quite 3 o'clock, but maybe 2:30. And I've since learned, I'm not sure whether we're going to find that I learned this in the course of this particular series of practice operations, but that once you get the bevel set, you can open that flute up a bit and get a whole lot more cutting action out of the wing to remove the waste, and things go way faster. And it's kind of, with each piece, depending on the density of the wood, how dry it is, all that, the proper flute angle may vary a bit, but you definitely don't need to keep it fully closed the way I'm doing here. You're just making the nose of the tool, slicing, do all the work, and getting almost no help from the wing. And of course, one of the main advantages of the 40/40 bowl gouge is that magic combination that lets you slice with the nose and peel with the wing. And here I'm getting, not all my cutting is happening just at the tip. That said, I'm clearing the wood out of there considerably faster than I ever have in the past. In my very limited experience of making bowls prior to this, this is the part of the operation that freaked me out the most, that I had the least clue what I was doing, and the most problems, the most catches, and was just painfully slow getting the bowl hollowed out. So right out of the gate here, while there's obviously a lot of improvement to be had, it's off to a decent start. Notice here how I'm using my left thumb on the tool rest to at least try to keep the tool from skidding. And what I'm trying to point out there, silent film style, is that this is the first bowl, remember. I've made, 3 or 4 passes so far, and I'm already finding that the tool has gotten quite hot from these big fat cuts, and it's something that I think pretty quick here we're going to find. I got a water bottle to dip the tool into, particularly towards the outer cuts where I really needed to worry about the tool skating. And there I'm pointing out that these are not nice long curls coming off the tool, that it's pretty much dust, not what you're looking for. That I think is going to improve. But yeah, so I kept a water bottle handy to dip the tool into and cool it off when I got out here and was needing to use my thumb. And I am getting some skidding problems where the tool gets grabbed by the wood and jumps to the outside. At this point, I'm trying to match the angle of the wood. So basically, at this point, cutting in perpendicular to the face of the bowl, top of the bowl, and then picking up the curvature of the bowl as I go deeper. So this is where I need to be both pushing and swinging the tool at the same time. All the while, of course, avoiding pushing or pulling with the left hand, just letting the left hand provide the neutral down force. Still there, look, that tool is about as close to 3 o'clock fully closed as it could be. Including some longer shavings there. That's not too bad for a first pass. Alright, so that first pass is complete. With a bowl of any depth at all, it's going to take more than one set of cuts to get as deep as you can get with the 40-40 bowl gouge. So here we're starting the second pass, which you have an advantage on the second pass because the first pass left that set of grooves that you can use as your starting point. So it's that much easier. You're not really having to concentrate on getting the tool started. You just drop it into one of those grooves and push in for another inch or two. It occurs to me that one thing we have not talked about here yet is catches. I mean, yeah, we've talked about things to do to avoid them and where there's a risk of catches and all that, but actual catches occurring as I'm turning here, there have been a few minor ones, particularly as I recall in cutting the recess for mounting the blank for shaping the outside. I had a few times when the scraper caught on me. I'm sure there have been a few other times that I've forgotten. But in general, this has been a remarkably catch-free process, and I attribute that to having some better sense of how to hold the tools and bring them into contact with the wood. And having good sharp tools. But man, I tell you, this process before on the small handful of bowls that I made over the years before this, hollowing out the bowls was, I think terrifying might be a bit too strong a word, but it was at least daunting and a bit scary, because when I didn't know which tools to use and how to address the wood with them, I couldn't go a minute without catches, and some of them were rather scary. I don't know that I ever blew anything up with a bad catch, but I was pretty apprehensive going at the inside of bowls, and yeah, that's just, I'm not sure it had occurred to me until now that from that perspective, this whole process went remarkably smoothly. And that, I'll tell you, is an actually unexpected development here. You know, I certainly hoped that I would have fewer catches than I used to, but I certainly didn't expect that I would virtually eliminate them, at least serious, scary ones. I'll take it. That was actually the last pass at this phase in the process. Here we're going to cut to after I used the bottom bowl gouge on this one. You can see no more ridges on the inside, but I wanted to do one more pass with the 40-40 to thin down the side just that little bit more. And that's something I had the luxury of doing because this is some of that really old dry oak that didn't change shape in between when I first hollowed this out, and probably at least hours, if not a day or two later, with some greener wood that I've turned recently. I've turned some really green stuff, basically wet. And, if I'd come back 15 minutes later, it had already changed shape enough that I would have been hard-pressed to do another cut on the inside like this. No such problem here. So the first phase of hollowing out this first bowl with the 40-40 bowl gouge took me about 11 minutes. Not too bad by my standards. And I would estimate that I got the wall thickness down to about 3/16. Definitely less than a quarter. You know, hardly what anybody would call a thin-edged bowl, but compared to a lot of stuff I see by newbie turners like myself, it's not too bad. And you know, there's some tool marks in there. You can't really see them, but trust me. But yeah, again, for the first effort at this, I'll take it. And that does it for blank number 1 of, I think we have 18 here. Let's kick it into high gear, at least for a little while. And blank number 2. One thing that I'd like to call attention to that I am not doing as I intended. Right here, not too bad. Going in, those first 2 cuts were pretty straight, but look, I'm already starting to do a big sweep. Not a big sweep, but you know, I should still be just making straight cuts, get the tool set and push it straight in. There's no need for me to be doing a sweep at this point in the process. I don't know why I was doing that, whether I decided it would be good practice to do the sweeping cut like I'll be doing once I get out to the edge. But at least, you know, for not that I'll ever be doing production turning, but you know, I do not want to be effectively wasting effort by doing an unnecessary curve. When you're doing the curve cut, you know, the sweeping the tool through there, it's more effort and it is running into more end grain. You know, the tool can slice across it no problem, but I could just move faster if I were doing straight angled cuts, kind of conical cuts into there. I stopped the lathe at this point and I'm checking it out because I could feel something had gone wrong, and there we see what it was. A chunk had come out, and there, you know, it's cracked enough that with very little force I was able to tear a piece off. And you can see a crack running down the far side of the bowl here. At this point I should have taken that thing off the lathe, but I guess this is just further evidence that I seem incapable of learning that I should not be turning cracked wood. So I'm not sure what I was expecting to accomplish here. Just get more practice? I don't know, but this outcome is rather predictable. There we go. I managed to take off both sides there. That thing was cracked on both fronts, and both of them gave way, and once again I'm just lucky to have come away unscathed. Now this one, blank number 3, keep an eye on it. This one's not going to be as dramatic, but it's going to go awry quickly, right there. The problem here is that the tenon was too small. You know, when I first put it on the chuck, it seemed like I had a decent grip, but there wasn't enough there for it to hold on to, and once I put a little pressure on there, it started to wobble. So that tenon was too small for even my smallest jaws, and that blank went into the scrap heap. While we're in the top view here for a little while, let's take this opportunity to talk about stance. I see 3 mistakes that I'm making here. First off, I'm a little too close to the bowl. That is not to the lathe, but laterally. I should be a few inches farther to my right, which would move me to the left in this view, and that would give me a slightly more comfortable angle, particularly for these cuts here where I'm having to press my thumb down. You can see that's kind of an awkward angle for my wrist to get into position to press down on the tool rest and keep the tool from skidding at the entry to the cut. Throughout the rest of the cut, it's not too bad, but just right there, if I were a little bit farther away, that would be easier. Actually, I think there I moved a little farther away. Another thing we'll see, right now I'm not doing it. Right now I'm not too bad, but a lot of the cuts, particularly earlier on, working towards the center of the bowl, I don't have my right foot far enough forward. Not quite parallel, but pretty close to parallel to the lathe, and should definitely concentrate on having the right foot forward more. There, I actually am left foot. Oh, that's okay. That's a different cut. I'm not going in yet. So, right foot forward more, just as a habit. For some of those earlier cuts, I'm not swinging the tool as much, so it's not critical. But just to kind of get in the habit of being in the right position, I should definitely have my right foot farther forward. And then the third thing is a subtle one that I realized fairly late was really affecting my ability to make the full swing of the tool comfortably, is that I have my feet kind of pointed towards the work, towards the bowl. And I want to have them pointed more perpendicular to the lathe. Having them pointed towards the bowl as I'm starting to lean back, transfer my weight to my rear foot, left foot that is. Having my feet pointed towards the bowl is making it difficult to do that weight transfer smoothly. I end up kind of on the side of my foot, not very comfortable. And since I've figured that out and done a better job of keeping my feet pointed perpendicular to the lathe, that operation has become way more comfortable. I kind of thought of stance as the easiest, simplest of the elements to kind of keep track of and get right, but it turns out there's more to it than just right foot forward, left foot forward, whatever. You got the distance from the bowl, the distance from the lathe, the angle of the feet relative to the lathe and the work, and keeping all of those straight and getting them all right when you're concentrating on how to hold the tool and other things. It's proving a bit more challenging than I expected. This blank, number 6 today, gives us an excuse to go back to talking about the mount on the chuck. So a few minutes back, with blank number 3, we had the problem where the tenon was just too small and the jaws couldn't grip it. This one goes to the other aspect of what makes a good mount on the chuck. So that you might remember from when I cut the tenons episode or 2 back, that the 2 keys are a tenon that has the right size and the dovetail cut to match the profile of the inside of the jaws. And that the second key part is having a good shoulder that seats against the face of the jaws. And that provides location, and it provides the support so that the wood, the blank, is solidly held and doesn't have the opportunity to flex. And what we're going to see with this piece is that I don't have that shoulder seated properly. Now, if you're looking at this and you're seeing the thing wobble a little bit right there, that's not really the problem. I don't think that the problem I was having was pronounced enough to be visible. What I'm doing here is using a playing card to look for a place where there's a gap between the jaws, the face of the jaws, and the shoulder of the bowl. And I found one there, so I loosened it up, rotated about a quarter turn, maybe probably less than that, so you're not getting right back to another set of jaws, kind of in between the jaws. So I guess that would be an eighth of a turn, and then crank it back down and check again for any kind of gap. Using a card for this is yet another trick that I picked up from Stuart. I think he uses a piece of paper instead of a card, which might be better because most pieces of paper are a little thinner than a playing card. I like the playing card because it's stiff, so it's easier to kind of jam it in and see whether it's sliding in there. Before we stopped and we're talking about using the card, I was pointing out that the little bit of a visual wobble you're seeing here, that's just from it not being exactly aligned with how it was when I cut the tenon. That's not really what I was feeling that caused me to stop and check for the gap. It was a much more subtle vibration that I was picking up through the tool. A lot of times the bowl won't be perfectly centered, especially in this case because I had cut those tenons a day or two before probably, and I'm not sure which type of wood or how dry it was, but the wood might have flexed a little bit in the process and time in between. So that's not unusual for it to be just a little bit out of round, but that wasn't the problem that caused me to go checking on the quality of the mount. So something that I learned after I recorded these videos, and obviously before I'm recording the voiceover, is that you don't want to go as thin as you can right away here. So in a second you're going to see here I'm making my first pass to hollow, and right about here I'm going to go ahead and take it down about as thin as I'm going to go. One more cut, I think. And then go and do a second pass to make it deeper. Actually on that one I didn't, but in many cases I'm going and doing a second pass deeper, and then I'm working with the bottom bowl gouge. And oftentimes then you're going to want to make one light pass with the 40/40 to clean up the first part of the cut, and then a final pass with the 40/40 where you blend everything together, and that's your final work on the inside. Well, by going thin right now like I'm doing on this cut, and then going and doing all that other stuff and then coming back, by then the wood has had time to move. And so what both Stuart and Kent Weekly over at turnawoodbowl.com recommend is leave that outer, wait until the very end to take the final thinning cut on the inside. Having that extra eighth of an inch, quarter inch, whatever, of wood around the lip will prevent the wood from moving as much. And then when you make the final pass, you have more structural stability in the wall of the bowl. It won't have moved as much, so you're not dealing with a bowl that's no longer round, which really makes it difficult, if not impossible, to get that final clean cut. So that's something that I've started to do. I don't know how I missed that in Stuart's video where he addresses this. I can't remember which one it was, but I went back and rewatched that video not too long ago and saw, oh, geez. I've run into the problem he's talking about, and now I know the solution is to wait until later in the process to really get it thin from the inside. And then, of course, as I think I talked about in the very, very beginning, if you're going for a super thin bowl, you're going to want to do the real thinning work from the outside once the bowl is mounted on a jam chuck. And we'll come back to that in the very final episode of this series, why that is. So I don't want to steal the thunder now. We've slowed down to real speed here, which is a clue that something's going to be happening. And again, I don't want to give it away, but stay tuned. While we're waiting for that, let's check in on how I'm doing with my flute angle. Starting off fully closed as I should be. I'm still leaving it way too closed. I should be rotating that to at least 2 o'clock, maybe 1:30. Once I have the bevel set. It's definitely what I'm doing these days. And you find the sweet spot. You know, you need to have it closed to set the tool so to keep it from skating. But man, once you learn to rotate the handle and open up the flute, you'll find it just, it's really like an accelerator, like a throttle on a motorcycle. Here we're getting close to the reason that we slowed down and zoomed in here. I'll give you 3 guesses as to what goes wrong here, and if you guess cracks, and more cracks, then you win. Just once again, I'm turning chunks of wood that have no business on a lathe. You'll be able to see here shortly the discoloration at the top that showed that this was not a subtle crack. It was big enough for water and stuff to get in there and discolor the wood, and you can see the other side would have gone shortly if this one hadn't. Not much to learn here. It's just cracks, but slow-mo is always fun, so let's take another look at this. I think we're running about 16% there. You can see the piece go flying off to the side, and from the other angle. 3, 2, 1, bam. See how fast that left the frame? It was gone in about 1/15 of a second, and that's running at 1/8 speed. Just be glad I wasn't standing in front of it. And on to the next blank. An interesting paradox just occurred to me about this whole hollowing operation, both phases, the 40-40 bowl gouge and the bottom bowl gouge that comes in the next episode. That's that on the one hand, the final cut to get it down to the finished surface on the inside is probably the most important cut in all of the making of a bowl, because sanding the inside of a bowl is harder than sanding the outside of a bowl. Getting a good surface if the tool left a lot of tool marks, or worse yet, tear out. It's just harder on the outside. But on the other hand, the majority of the time that you spend hollowing out a bowl is just removing wood. You know, it's cuts where you don't care about the finish, the surface at the end of that particular cut, because there's going to be another cut that is going to take off another layer of wood. So if you messed up the last cut, it doesn't matter. Now, obviously, that's the case with a lot of cuts in wood turning. Most of the cuts, it doesn't matter, because there's another cut to come, and that's the one, or the one 3 cuts later is the one that matters. It's just that with hollowing, there are more of those cuts that don't matter. You know, when you're shaping the outside, it takes 3, maybe 4 cuts to, once you're good at it, to shape the outside of the bowl. Even with cuts where nothing is going to survive, like flattening the end or roughing it down to a cylinder, that's just a transient step and nothing is going to survive. But again, it only takes 2 or 3 passes to get it down to that surface for whatever comes next. Whereas with hollowing, you can see right here, it's taking me 5, 6, 8 cuts to hollow out a bowl. And so there's just a larger percentage of your time in this particular operation where you really don't care about the surface that you're creating in a given cut. And on top of that, you're not making artistic decisions along the way, compared to shaping the outside of the bowl, where you're defining the shape of the final bowl. Here, you're just getting to the point where you're matching the decision that was made in the course of shaping the outside of the bowl. The point being that this is kind of like grunt work. You're just clearing wood out of the middle of the bowl for the majority of this operation. And by extension, this is the best opportunity to kind of put the pedal down and to concentrate on speed, removing wood as quickly as possible. And in this context, it's worth pointing out that just like every other aspect of bowl turning, there are a lot of different tools and techniques for hollowing a bowl. I've seen people use a bowl gouge using just the wing to peel the wood and working from the center out. I haven't really seen videos of it, but I gather there are people who work entirely with carbide tools, which is basically functions as a variation of a scraper, and a rather small tool, generally speaking, but they're able to hollow the bowl with just carbide tools. I've seen people using conventional scrapers for hollowing purposes. Generally, having it angled so that it's taking off wood pretty cleanly. And I don't know if this is a real thing, but I gather from some forums that I'm on that some people will actually hollow a bowl with what's called a negative rake scraper. And I'm not going to try and explain what that is. In my experience or my limited knowledge of it, they're generally used just for providing a clean finish. But on these forums, it appears that people are using that tool for hollowing. Maybe I'm misinterpreting. Bottom line, though, is, at least in my admittedly limited experience, nothing can compare with a 5/8 or 3/4 inch 40/40 bowl gouge using the push cutting technique when it comes to hollowing a bowl. I mean, I'm new at this. I barely know what I'm doing, and you can see I'm hollowing out an 8-inch bowl in maybe 2 or 3 minutes. You're watching this mostly at about 5x speed, so that's not a very good way to judge how long it's taking me, unless you're good at kind of doing that math in your head and figuring how long it's really taking me. But in a pass, you're taking out anywhere from about 3/8 to 5/8 of an inch of wood per pass, and of course you double that because you're taking it out on both sides of the bowl, if you know what I mean. And within a matter of a few minutes, you can hollow out even a large bowl with the 40/40 bowl gouge. And then on top of that, of course, is the significant added advantage that final cut, if you know what you're doing, you can get a beautiful, clean, tear-free surface
straight off of the slicing action of the 40/40 bowl gouge. Don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting for a second that I've achieved that level of skill, but it is attainable. And once you've gotten that good, you're getting the best of both worlds. You can hollow a bowl in a quick, efficient manner, and you can end up with a finished surface that requires very little sanding. So clearly you know which path I've chosen to go down, and I'd like to think I made a good one. My main point, though, is not to sell you on using the push cutting technique in the 40/40 bowl gouge, as much as just to think about this before you get too far. And it would be great to try out different techniques, work with a few different mentors who do things differently, and decide which one clicks with you the most. But the main thing I would really urge you to do is to do that homework early and pick a technique that you feel good about, and then stick with it until you've mastered it. To really focus on one and get to where you're competent and confident using it, rather than go with kind of a grab bag of working with 4 or 5 different techniques and not putting in the time and effort to become really proficient at one of them. And of course, if you get really good at one, there's nothing to keep you from attempting, trying your hand at another one. But one big advantage to picking one technique and sticking with it is that you can settle in on a particular set of tools. I have 3 bowl gouges, 1/2 inch, 5/8, and 3/4, and all 3 of them are ground 40/40. This is not something I've studied or researched or to talk to people in my club about, but I'd be willing to bet that there are people who have, bowl gouges with 3 or 4 or 5 different grinds on them. An Irish grind and a fingernail grind and an Ellsworth grind and a 40/40, and maybe multiple gouges in different grinds. And that ends up being a significant investment in tools, just to have different grinds that you use for essentially the same purpose in slightly different circumstances. And granted, there may be cases where a 40/40 bowl gouge and the push cutting technique is not going to work as well as an Ellsworth grind and whatever technique that goes with. But is it really worth it to have multiple sets of tools with different grinds just to be able to use them in slightly different circumstances? For my money, not so much. All right, we have slowed down to real speed here because this is the last bowl in this pass, in the hollowing with a 40/40 bowl gouge pass. And per tradition, we're going to slow down and see how things are going here. Let's concentrate first on what the flute angle is looking like at this point. It appears that I am not still opening it up much, but boy, those are some nice shavings coming off of there, I gotta say. I'm not going to complain about that. I would guess that flute is pointed at about 2 o'clock. And these days, here we are 6 months after I shot this stuff, and I've done a couple of dozen bowls since then. And I would wager that I'm probably closer to 1:30 than 2 o'clock. But again, you look at the results, and I got some pretty good shavings coming off of there, and it's taken me all of 5-10 seconds to make a pass. with decent results. So, final judgment on how far I've come on this, I'd say it was a pretty successful practice session. One thing we haven't talked about in this whole episode, as far as I recall, is the quality of the finished cut, of the final pass. And I'm not sure what I have to say about that. There I am. I think that's the first time we really see me cooling the gouge so that I can use my thumb to press and keep it from skidding. I mentioned it once or twice, but that's the only time I think that it actually survived in the final edit. There's Bounder. But we're getting close to the final pass here, at least for this depth of cut. And as I was saying, I'm not sure I have much to say about how good the quality was. It's been a number of months since I did this, and I don't really recall how pleased I was with the finish I was getting and how much sanding I had left to do. I mean, a number of these bowls didn't even survive to the finish line for one reason or another. You've seen at least 2 or 3 that blew up in the course of this episode, and without giving too much away, there's at least a couple more that won't make it across the finish line from the bottom bowl gouge, and I think 1 or 2 more meet their maker. That I was reasonably pleased with the quality of the cuts, the cleanness of them. I had no torn grain, and the tool marks were within a range that they could be sanded out fairly easily. Well, thanks for watching. See you again on the second phase, the bottom bowl gouge phase of hollowing. Cheers. Oh, almost forgot to encourage you to like and subscribe, and all hail me, Bola Gouge.